Hi there, and welcome to our It Starts With Mom live conversation today on taking your baby home from the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, or NICU. I'm Kara Gallardi, Associate Vice President for March of Dimes NICU Family Support. All babies and families deserve the best possible start, but unfortunately, not every pregnancy goes as planned, and too many families find their babies in the NICU due to preterm birth, birth defects, surgical or genetic conditions, or other diagnoses. This time can be stressful and overwhelming for families. So the March of Dimes has responded by providing support and education and information to families during their NICU stay and as they transition to home. I am so lucky to work with incredible NICU families and staff and hospital partners all around the country. And as a NICU graduate myself, I heard through my whole life from my own mother about the incredible people and resources around them that help care for me, care for my family, my parents, and my 4 siblings. So it's especially an honor to be with you all today because September is also NICU Awareness Month, and we have a very special episode today in honor of NICU families with a unique and heartfelt look at this experience through the eyes of those who know their baby best, Mom. Today's event is also sponsored by our new partner, Massimo Stork, who is supporting the March of Dimes NICU Family Support Program nationwide. We recently came together with Massimo because of our shared focus of helping families during their NICU stay and especially during their transition to home. Massimo is a global leader of innovative monitoring technologies used in hospitals across the country. Their Stork monitor is the only FDA-cleared baby monitor that uses the same technology that's been trusted in hospital NICUs for over 25 years. So parents can enjoy peace of mind that comes with knowing that they're bringing trusted and accurate technology into their home. We're very thankful for Massimo Stork's partnership and support. So let's get started. I'm so pleased to introduce you to Lauren Meadows. Lauren is a mom of 2 from Indiana. She spent 7 years as an intern up until last year, and she's now a full-time mom and content creator. She shares her daily life as a mom with her 5-month-old son, Teddy, and her 2-year-old daughter, along with her favorite mom hacks, DIY projects, and very relatable motherhood moments. Lauren's passionate about sharing her experience with her intrauterine growth restriction, or IUGR, pregnancy and Teddy's NICU journey. Her hope is to make every mom feel seen and heard through sharing her life with others. And we're going to do that today. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
We're thrilled to have you. And you know, here at the March of Dimes, we love and really deeply value hearing stories from families and really understanding their real experience and taking that knowledge and putting it back into the support and services we offer to NICU families that will unfortunately be coming after you. So we're going to really start right there. So can you tell us about Teddy's birth story and how you came to spend time in the NICU?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with IUGR at 24 weeks. We had our normal anatomy scan at 20 weeks and everything was pretty good then. The only reason that I had another ultrasound at 24 weeks was because of his positioning. They just wanted like better pictures of his heart. And at that scan, he was in like the 7th percentile. His fluid levels were low, so we also had oligohydramnios, and then my blood pressure was 170/92, and this was all at that one appointment. So I went from that ultrasound straight to being admitted, and that was at 24 weeks, which is really scary because that's like just viability. And then we met with MFM the next day, and their recommendation was for me to stay in the hospital for 10 weeks till I delivered at 34. And I had, my daughter at the time was 18 months old. I stayed home with her full time, and it was also flu season. And so there were like flu restrictions. So she like couldn't come to the room to visit me. I had to visit her in the waiting room for like 20 minutes a day. So that first visit in the hospital, I stayed for about 10 days. And my provider and I thankfully came to an agreement where I would get like 2 NSTs a week and an ultrasound a week and just be very monitored closely, outpatient. So we did that. I was in and out of the hospital a couple more times because of my blood pressure, his fluid levels. A couple times he wasn't like as active on the scans. But I last got admitted at 32 weeks. He, throughout that time, had dropped from like the 7th percentile to less than 1st percentile. So he was just completely off the charts. And I was on 2 blood pressure medications, and the fluid levels were still low. Luckily, like the umbilical cord and stuff was okay, but I stayed in the hospital the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy. And we tried to do an induction. And unfortunately, when my water broke, we had a cord prolapse and had to have an emergency C-section. So that was also not part of the plan. And it was a really big bummer and disappointment because I wanted to do one thing in my pregnancy and all of it fell out of control. And I really wanted to deliver him and not have to do a C-section, especially not in that way. But he came out crying, and I actually got to like kind of hold him in the C-section suite, which was like super important to me. And he actually like reached over and grabbed my face, and we have like a video of it, and it was just like really sweet. He was 3 pounds 3 ounces though, and spent 29 days in the NICU. After that, his biggest things that like he had to accomplish and his challenges were obviously breathing. He was on CPAP for a few days and high flow oxygen. And he did have jaundice as well for like a week. So he was under the belly light. But his biggest thing was like eating and gaining weight and not having bradycardic or apneic episodes during that time. So we really struggled with that for like the last 2 weeks of his stay. We would have a discharge date, and then he would have an episode, and we'd have to restart the clock, and then he'd have an episode again. And he failed like his first car seat test. So just a lot of, in the NICU, it's like 1 step forward, 5 steps back. So he had to get on and off oxygen a few times. And like feeding tube came out a couple times, went back in. And then we finally got to come home. But it was a journey, and felt like it was like never going to end during the time.
Yeah, and Lauren, so much of what you're sharing, we hear from families across the country every day as we're fortunate to serve them and help them through this experience. And I just want to sort of talk for a minute, because you started off with just this scenario of how unexpected and unplanned all this was for you. It's flu season. It's, they're telling you a 10-week stay with, your little girl at home, and how like hard and extra challenging that must have been for you. And you were very clear about what you wanted too for your delivery to be. So can you talk a little bit more about how you were able to manage, what that was like to have a baby in the NICU? You were, as a trauma nurse, you certainly are not unfamiliar with an intensive care setting, but NICU is different, and it's always different. We hear from families when it's your baby and you're the mom. So can you tell us a little bit about that perspective?
Yeah, luckily for me, like we got to stay in his room overnight. So being in the hospital setting was comfortable for me. Even when I was admitted, when I was pregnant, I wasn't like uncomfortable with like the hospital smells or the alarms and stuff. Now they are kind of like triggering because with him, like when he would have his episodes, it felt like it was always like as soon as we fell asleep and would wake up to him like not breathing. So beyond that though, it was difficult because he is like my own baby in there, but I did feel at least a little more comfortable knowing like what like the nurse's schedule was, which any NICU family gets to know the daily schedule, and when they're going to come in and do baths or weights and that type of stuff. And as far as like staying there, I just felt really lucky that we got to stay the night in the room with him, and he had his own private room, because I have heard that some NICUs don't have that. And being away from your baby is just like unnatural. So I was really grateful for that. I think it would have been a lot harder if I could not have stayed there with him. And my husband and I did take turns, and I tried to come home a little bit so that I could be with my daughter. but it just didn't feel right coming home without him.
Yeah, oftentimes family will say, that coming home without your baby, whether it's, one day or 100 days, or in many cases, even far longer, that's one of the most challenging pieces. This whole idea of you sharing this postpartum experience too, the March of Dimes has really incredible resources to help moms, really write and help to process that postpartum resource. And you're really helping us do that all now. I mean, talking about how unexpected that C-section was and how clear you were about what you wanted it to be, and then how you dealt with, what it ended up being, and finding some really beautiful moments in that too. But you've also mentioned the things that were triggering for you. So what were some of the supports and other resources that you needed or you found helpful while you were in the NICU?
Yeah, it was nice to be able to look up on March of Dimes, like what to expect as far as like discharge. And when his discharge kept getting pushed back, I felt like I was kind of alone in that, but it's very normal. That seems to happen to most NICU families. But like discharge planning and just knowing kind of the things that need to be checked off as far as like car seat study, and his weight had to be at a certain, like he had to be over 4 pounds, and not have these events. It was nice to know that we were like on the right track and able to look up those types of things on March of Dimes.
Oh, we're so glad you found that helpful. And what you said is so true, that it's like that one step forward, 2 steps back, you're restarting the clock if something doesn't go the way that they want it to. So this idea of like how to be ready and how to prepare for that transition to home is really important. So we're glad that the March of Dimes resources on preparation for discharge to home was really helpful to you. That's great. Can you tell us a little bit more, like what were some of the milestones that he had to reach that helped you maybe know that he was getting a little bit closer, even if maybe he didn't get there in the exact order you wanted him to? And from what we hear from many families, never quite as fast as you wanted to. But what were some of those milestones you were looking for and those benchmarks that you were watching for to make sure you had a good idea, even with your knowledge and understanding, to make sure you were getting ready to go home?
The car seat study was like a big one. I think everyone knows that's like you're getting close to home. All right, I'm gonna put him down for a second.
Do whatever you need.
There we go. All right. Okay. So yeah, the car seat study was a big milestone that we were looking forward to. And my daughter, I actually had preeclampsia with her, but it didn't develop until 34 weeks, and I had her at 36. So she had like a 1-night NICU observation stay, but she did have to do the car seat study. Mm-hmm. So I was familiar with that. And that was like the one test she had, and it gave us so much anxiety. So that was something that we knew he had to pass, and he did fail the first time. And then he had to be over 4 pounds, because car seats, you have to make the weight. There are like car beds, but that was not going to be an option for him. And then he had to be off of oxygen, and had to be eating by mouth and taking bottles. And also not having these bradycardic, low heart rate events and apneic events for 3 days, which I've heard that some hospitals it's like 5 to 7 days in between, but those 3 days are so long. And like one time we were going to get discharged, and it was like 2 hours before we were going to get discharged, and he had an episode. I was miserable. It was awful. And you understand as a mom, like, you don't want him to go home and have an episode and me be sleeping, which also, like, along with discharge planning, like those monitors like Massimo Stork would give moms peace of mind for that. And so I was like ready to take him home if I had one of those monitors. But we had to wait for those events to stop. And they finally did one day, but They do say, like, usually NICU stay, you have to wait till the baby's due date. Like, they won't say any earlier a lot of times. And he did get out 2 weeks before his due date, so I guess he got out a little bit earlier, as far as like setting expectations. But those were like the big things that he had to accomplish.
And he got there. He finally got there. Those
He did.
1 step forward, 2 steps back, another step forward, a few steps back. That is what we hear from moms just like you all around the country, that this NICU journey is really just incredibly challenging because of all these stops and starts, often referred to as a roller coaster. You must have heard that as well too, that it's all these unexpected, turns, and you're trying to have some control and clarity over what's going to be happening, and that's a really hard thing when you can't have that in a NICU experience.
Yeah, my pregnancy, I had to completely like let go of control, which was really difficult for me. So
Yeah, I think that's really difficult for a lot of women and a lot of moms, whether it's your first or you're not your first, and it's really hard to give up that control of the experience. And that's why it really is important that you have good support all around you during your stay, before your stay, in your case, in terms of anticipating a NICU stay, and then certainly as you transition to home. So we've talked a little bit about this unexpected event of at this end of your pregnancy, this plus a 2-week bed rest, which many moms will tell us is just so disruptive and really challenging. And, you're trying to do everything you can for your baby, but at the same time, it's a really hard thing for a whole family to go through. And then Teddy's here and you're getting to this point now, and he gave you that really close option where he was going to be ready to go home. And then he had a few more days to get through, but now it's going home day. So that transition to home, families will tell us, this is what you've been shooting for, right? This is what you're watching every monitor for. You're counting everything. You want to make sure all the tests are passed, and then you're ready to go home. It's often such an exciting time, but parents will also equally then follow that up with, it's also a very, very stressful time as well too. You're leaving this incredible support system of the NICU, people you probably got to know well, certainly gave you great care. So when you finally got the news that this was it, Teddy was going to be able to go home, you could be discharged together as your family. What did you do to prepare for that experience of getting ready to go home?
yeah, so I was nervous to like set up the bassinet at home. I didn't want to jinx anything. And so really like the day before, we did get everything ready and set up the bassinet and finally like washed his clothes and bottles, those types of things, like actually got stuff ready at home. Like I was saying, the monitors like Massimo Stork are a great option for moms to transition to home because we're so used to our babies being on the monitor. And with him having all of those events, it was hard to trust that when we went home, he would be okay. So having a monitor like that definitely does give peace of mind, and let like mom sleep at night, because I could at least at the hospital know that something was going to alarm if something was wrong, and a nurse would come running in eventually pretty quickly. But yeah, we got all of that ready, and we really kind of like didn't talk about it though, because the first time we thought we were taking him home and he wasn't able to go home was so disappointing. And I was like angry, and I was angry with the doctors, which I was angry with the nurses. And like, as a nurse, I know like logically what they're doing is right. But as a mom, I was mad, and I just wanted to take my baby home, and it wasn't fair. Cause like he had like 4 or 5 neighbors come and go home between the time that we were there. So I just kept seeing people leave, and it was never us. But when the day finally did come, we had everything ready by the time it was time for rounds, and literally packed up the room, took him as quickly as possible. And like, it felt like it wasn't real and it wasn't happening. And we were waiting for like the other shoe to drop. So I didn't feel relieved, not even in the car ride home. Like, I was still so stressed out. And I've talked to like my therapist about this quite a bit, that like it didn't feel like how I thought it would feel. I didn't have like this overwhelming like sense of joy. It felt kind of like an adrenaline crash. And I felt like out of body at home for like the first few days being at home with both of the kids. And like my daughter just met her brother for the first time that day. Like she hadn't been able to come to the NICU and meet him for a month. And I thought like that time would be so special and stuff. And it just like, it felt weird, which was really disappointing. And my therapist actually, she like compared it to your birthday, where you think your birthday is going to be this like perfect, big, great, happy day. And then a lot of people cry on their birthday because they're like disappointed, or it doesn't feel or like it's supposed to, or go the way it's supposed to in your mind. And that's kind of how that discharge day felt. I was obviously so glad to be home, but it didn't feel real, and I didn't feel like I could like relax and celebrate.
Yeah, and again, Lauren, it's so understandable, and again, what you're sharing, which we hope is helpful, is what we hear from families around the country, that this discharge day, this transition to home, is both. It's long hoped for. The anticipation is massive, honestly, but also really scary. And then the actual experience can feel different than what you thought it would be too. It's a huge transition for your whole family, and I just appreciate you sharing that about your daughter too. That's really helpful. That this was like your first time that your daughter was meeting her brother after 29 days in the NICU. That's not what you probably had thought of first thing when you thought about bringing your second child home.
No, not at all. But it was still special. It was just a different day than I imagined.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked about, how stressful things can be, and, unmet expectations and all of that in terms of peace of mind and feeling confident and capable to care for your baby at home. The mental health aspect. I mean, in the NICU, baby is the patient, and moms and dads are certainly well cared for as well too. But it's really important that you, as the parent, also is getting that care and support. So, how and what did you receive, or how did you help yourself to care for your own mental health once you got home?
He wants to join again.
Perfect timing.
So while I was in the NICU, or he was in the NICU, the nurses were really great. And so like the lactation consultants, on top of all of this, which this is like the least like concerning thing, but like I don't produce milk very well. So that also led to a lot of feelings of like not feeling good enough and nothing else is going right. So I met with the lactation consultants a lot, and they were people that gave me a lot of like emotional support, which was nice. And after we got home, I immediately started looking up like a pregnancy, like high risk pregnancy and birth trauma therapist, like that specialized in that, because my delivery was just really scary. Having a prolapsed cord, like I know as a nurse, like that's like one of the biggest emergencies you can have in a delivery situation. And like when it happened, my doctor he had broken my water and said like, I feel cord. And like, I immediately knew it was going to happen. And it was like what you hear in nursing school or see on TV. My doctor was literally riding on the bed with me as they were pushing me down the hallway to the C-section to make sure the cord didn't come out anymore, which is terrifying. And I didn't know if like he was okay, because we couldn't get him on the monitor or anything at that point. So my birth was not what I thought at all. And I really struggled with that, and like could not believe that was real for a long time. So I found a therapist, and I've been going to her for like 5 months now, and it's been really, really good. I struggled a lot with also when I was pregnant, like people saying, oh, you don't even look pregnant, or you look so small. And people mean that in a good way, but when your baby's not growing because of your body, it really makes you feel like crap. So that's something that I struggled with a lot and talk about a lot. And also when people comment on his size, they'll be like, how old is he? And I tell them, and they're like, oh, he's so little. And I'm like, well, he's lucky to be alive. He was 3 pounds when he was born. And it's really hard. But my therapist has helped me go through those and like work through the birth trauma as well, because I carry a lot of like guilt and burden because of that, because it's my body. I couldn't control it, but still you like wonder why your body did that.
Yeah, that's so hard. And thank you so much for sharing so honestly about this experience for you personally and sort of how it's continued to be challenging. Because I think you're speaking to a lot of folks right now who can really relate and understand that. And again, it's really important that, birth trauma is talked about and addressed. And for those who would benefit, the March of Dimes has some wonderful resources on, to be able to sort of work through and write through your birth story that we hear from many folks, especially NICU moms who have found that really helpful. Because again, so often the focus, and understandably so, is on the baby and caring for them. But it's really important that, moms really sort of talk about this experience and what it was and what it wasn't and how it often maybe didn't go the way you had hoped and dreamed. So thank you for sharing that. It's really helpful.
Yeah. I that's all I want is people to like hear my experience and know that they weren't alone in it. And like you said, it's really disappointing. And we always planned on just having 2 babies, and a boy and a girl, and we got that. But you never expect like your last pregnancy to be that experience. And my doctor doesn't recommend for me to have another baby because I would probably have to be like on a blood thinner. And we don't know what the outcome of that would be. So it is a lot that I've had to process and like grieve as far as like my pregnancy and childbearing years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really incredibly challenging. And it's like you said, with the whole control piece, when someone's telling you something has to be a certain way versus you getting to choose is really difficult. And again, from NICU families, we hear all the time how challenging that sort of lack of control is when they enter into this environment and this experience. So, the March of Dimes certainly aims to help families sort of feel as, confident and capable in the care of their baby, even though this may not have been the experience that they expected. We're fortunate to be a big part of helping families just go through that journey and hopefully, come out of that in a way that you're showing us right now can still be really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, we have to ask, since Teddy has made his grand appearance, how are you and how is Teddy doing now?
Yeah, so I'm doing better, especially as far as like mentally. Physically recovering from a C-section in a NICU is also really, really difficult. I didn't have a C-section with my daughter, so I did not know what to expect. So sleeping in like a recliner was hard. But physically, I am feeling great. Mentally, definitely a lot better. I can talk about like other people's pregnancies or birth experiences without feeling like jealous, honestly. And then he is doing really, really well. He is starting to gain weight well. He did have a tongue tie that we also had to get taken care of. And he does have high blood pressure, but they said sometimes just NICU babies, like preemie babies, have high blood pressure and grow out of it. So as far as that goes, like his kidneys are great, his heart is great. And then right now we're just working on like some developmental delays, which he's actually still doing really well as far as his adjusted age. But we have like physical therapy and occupational therapy that we've been working with. But other than that, just trying to get him to gain weight and catching up as far as like milestones go.
Well, congratulations, Mom. It sounds like you're doing a great job for yourself and a great job for him because he's pretty picture perfect from where we're sitting. So that's really wonderful. Lauren, what advice would you give to parents who might be watching this from a NICU themselves or watching this shortly after their experience, or maybe even like you anticipating a NICU stay? What would you want them to take away from your journey?
Yeah. A lot of times people would tell me during our NICU stay that it's just a blip in time. And that really angered me because it didn't feel like a blip in time. It felt like eternity. So I feel like that's a piece of advice that people say a lot, but I would say that yes, it feels like it's forever, but it is going to end one day. And to rely on your NICU staff, the nurses, like I said, they just doing like little crafts with his footprint meant the world. We were in there on Easter, and that was our first holiday as a family, and super disappointing to be in the NICU on Easter. And they did these little like bunny feet crafts with him, and that like meant the world. And they let me like dress him up in this little like bunny outfit I got. But so relying on your NICU staff, the nurses, the lactation consultants, I had a really good experience with them. And also advocating for yourself and for your baby. I feel like as a nurse, I am definitely more comfortable doing that because I'm used to advocating for my patients. But trying to advocate for yourself and learning from different resources, what to expect or how you feel like if your baby needs more tests, that type of thing. There's no harm in asking and advocating, and rely on your family and your partner. My husband and I had to really just be a team through it, especially with our daughter and with both of our parents, the sets of grandparents. We couldn't have done it without them, and my friends as well. So we had to rely on our whole community, and I am someone who doesn't like to ask for help, and I learned to ask for help through this situation because there's no way we would have been able to get through it on our own.
Yeah, that's some really, really great advice that, again, we've heard from, for more than 20 years running the March of Dimes NICU Family Support Program. We have heard from families, across the country, very, very similar advice. You mentioned, Easter and those keepsakes. And again, we hear from families all the time about how important a craft or a social activity like that can be, because it becomes this keepsake that you have, and we'll pull out at Easter maybe every year, or we hear from families that, keep those footprints and really sort of share those as really things they treasure as a family, and a way to share this really incredible story with Teddy, which is really an amazing thing for him to know his own experience and then your experience as well too. And then advocating for yourself is incredibly good advice. And asking for help, and really making sure that you have that community around you. And for those who may not have all of the support that you thankfully did, the March of Dimes is also there for you too. And we would really encourage anyone who's finds themselves in a NICU stay to take advantage of the Compass by March of Dimes app. It's incredible with consumer education. There's great information on the March of Dimes website, and really great support and education and information that I'm thrilled were helpful to you. And we always certainly hope are helpful to others. So if you would like to support the March of Dimes and during NICU Awareness Month, please consider a donation to help moms and babies just like Lauren and her family. And it's really great that, especially this month, that Massimo is triple matching our Nate donations. So we're going to pop a link up on the screen now. But we really would appreciate any support to continue to help families just like Lauren, and certainly beautiful little ones out there like Teddy. So Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your story and helping so many other families who may also have a baby who's experiencing a NICU stay. And thank you again to our partners at Massimo Stork for helping to produce this episode and for their support of the March of Dimes and NICU families everywhere. We encourage you to learn more by visiting marchofdimes.org/NICU initiatives. There you'll find more information, recommendations, stories from other moms, and the latest up-to-date information that you may need. Thank you to the March of Dimes and It Starts With Mom for this important program and conversation. Moms are the heart and soul of our world, and every mom and mom-to-be deserves the best, especially when it comes to their health and well-being. It Starts With Mom is an excellent resource for moms and moms-to-be and their families to help them along the way through pregnancy and beyond. There's so much that we as moms feel like we need to know, and it's truly impossible to know everything. But we do know that having healthy babies and families and communities, it starts with mom. So thank you. Thank you for joining us in this important conversation. And always remember, it starts with knowledge, it starts with community, and it starts with care. And as always, it starts with mom.